Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming to tonight's exploration of gratitude and possibly a journey into daily gratitude journaling of sorts over the next month. So what I want us to do today is we'll look at the source sheet that was sent out earlier. I'll share my screen for anyone who missed it, to look at one of many, I should say, really Jewish approaches to expressing gratitude and the value of expressing gratitude. And then I want to tie it specifically to this month, which is starting tonight, Chodesh Tov, and think about ways that we can come together to do that as a group or as lots of little groups. We can think about it. So I'm going to start. You're welcome to jump in at any point. When I share the screen, I can only see so many pictures, so please feel free to jump in if you have thoughts to share. They are always welcome. Hey, Avery.
Hi.
Okay, here we go. So I wanted to start, sort of set the framework for what I think is this Jewish philosophy of the value of expressing gratitude with a quote from Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel from his book, God in Search of Man. So what he says here, reading off the page, is our goal should be to live life in radical amazement. Get up in the morning and look at the world in a way that takes nothing for granted. Everything is phenomenal. Everything is incredible. Never treat life casually. To be spiritual is to be amazed. So first of all, I think it's a great quote. I think it makes you think about Modeh Ani in a sort of different way, right? It's not just gratitude. I think, right, in some ways, radical amazement and gratitude might be similar or have overlapping aspects to them. Right. So when you say Modeh Ani, you're certainly thanking God for waking up, but there's also this sort of like, wow, I woke up again, nature to expressing Modeh Ani. There's this really beautiful little book I got from PJ Library once. It's called Nurture the Wow. It's by Rabbi Dania Redenberg. And one of the little stories she tells about her own children is when her son was like 2 years old and they went to a restaurant and he'd never used a straw before. And the waiter brought over milk in these little styrofoam cups with the tops and the straws. And her little boy saw her bigger boy sipping from the straw. And so he was like, oh, I guess I'll try it too, right? He didn't have his normal sippy cup. And she describes the sort of look of delight on his face when he realized that like the straw was not just for fun, but like it was a vehicle for receiving some delicious liquid that was stored inside, right? And she said, like, how often, I just saw Rena sip something, right? How often are we like, wow, that's amazing. My Diet Coke came through my straw, right? And at the same time, how often should we feel that way? Not, that's like a very concrete, maybe example of the type of radical amazement that Rabbi Heschel is talking about. But I think that the idea is pretty cool. And one of the things that Rabbi Redenberg is suggesting is that if you have to cultivate that. And I think that that's the same as what Rabbi Heschel is saying. When we're children, we have it naturally and it slowly gets beaten out of us by, our education and the real life, hard realities of the world. But that if we cultivate it, we really can find those places everywhere. And I think that part of cultivating a gratitude practice is living life in radical amazement or nurturing the wow in our life. So that I would say is like the overarching principle of how I think about this idea. Anyone have a wow moment they want to say? A piece of radical amazement? Okay, it's early. Maybe you'll think of one later. But of course, Rabbi Heschel is fairly modern, right? And I think that this practice goes far, far before Rabbi Heschel. The Gemara in Menachot teaches a practice that is taught from a Breita, Tanya. Haya Rabbi Meir Omer, Rabbi Meir says, Chayav adam levarech mea brachot b'chol yom, that each person should recite 100 blessings every day. And he brings it based on like a wordplay in the pasuk from Devarim. And I think, I remember learning this as a kid, and you would like race to the water fountain as many times as you could to say a bracha of shahakol, so you'd get to your 100, right? But if you think about what Rabbi Meir is saying, I think that what he's saying is you should have 100 moments of radical amazement, 100 moments of gratitude to God every day that you can name, not just that like everyone has them, but that you can name them, right? Thank you, God, for making my limbs work in the morning, right? Thank you, God, for causing me to wake up. Moda'ani. Thank you, God, for giving me breakfast to eat, whatever bracha you say over the food, right? Thank you, God, for making my body work properly when you leave the bathroom. Thank you for making rainbows, right? And the bracha, I think, is just the way of expressing it in the language of the rabbis of the Breita. And so what Rabbi Meir is saying is you could find 100 moments of gratitude each day. The Kuzari, who is not usually sort of a law-oriented in this way sort of guy, he comments on this constant practice of brachot, right? That someone who shivarech tamid, someone who's constantly making brachot to get to their 100. And he says that, I'm just going to take a moment. Thank you, Sarah Weinberg, for chiming in. That's so nice. Sarah said she had a lot of wow moments with the leaves. Yes, I totally agree. I was thinking, as we start Cheshvan, I always start thinking like, ooh, where are my moments of gratitude going to come from? And when I walked outside and saw like the trees like on fire, I feel like it's particularly beautiful in this part of the country. I also felt like that was a real wow. I totally agree. Beautiful. Thank you. So the Kuzari is talking about the practice of constant bracha making. And he says something really interesting that I don't think is maybe obvious about it. He talks about the hizdamnut lahana'a, right? Preparing yourself for pleasure. So I think his example is not sort of one that is practical to the modern ear. So thinking about like an apple, you're about to make a bracha, right? You're, instead of just sort of mindlessly eating your
She just froze. I go vote. Help.
Right? That makes sense. That prepares you to say a bracha. That helps you out. But then he also says that you'll think about the imagining its absence. So not just readying yourself for pleasure. Oh, this apple will be delicious. Uh-oh, can you guys hear me? Oh, okay, good. My computer says it's trying to connect to the internet, but I could move if I have to. Okay. So not just the readiness to receive pleasure, but also to say, wow, how much worse would life be without this apple here? Right? And that when you think about both, right, when you've considered both, you will ultimately realize that by rights, you deserve no goodness, and then you will enjoy all of your days on earth. Right? So that is I think it's a little bit, it feels to me like a little bit depressing. I'm curious what other people think, right? It sounds to me like what the Kuzari is saying is you might not appreciate that apple in Skokie, where food, thank God, is plentiful. But if you imagined that you lived in, the Warsaw Ghetto, how much more attractive would every Brussels sprout be that appears on your plate? Because you could have lived without. So I think that's a hard way to do it. But I think that there's something about cultivating a relationship of gratitude, even when things are hard. And maybe that's what I took out of this idea of imagining its absence, right? Which is to say, like, when God forbid someone is sick in the hospital or someone is, struggling with keeping a job or whatever the thing is, those are the times, right, where often people don't believe in God or say they don't have a relationship with God. But to be able to cultivate a gratitude practice, even then, is like especially meaningful maybe for the Kuzari. But the Kuzari definitely links this practice of bracha making with being grateful for having the things that we have in our life. Okay. Definitely room for thoughts, questions. I spoke about Brene Brown over the beginning of Rosh Hashanah. She is a researcher, and she wrote this beautiful book, The Gifts of Imperfection. I spoke a little bit about it, that book over Yom Tov. One of the lines really jumped out to me. She writes that we, Americans, are a nation hungry for more joy. And the reason is not because we don't have it, but because we're starving from a lack of gratitude. Right. And I think that this is like where we really see the brachot practice come into play. When you eat mindlessly, or when you don't thank God in the morning for being able to see or hear or walk, is someone talking? When you don't take that pause, it's sometimes easy to feel like you don't have the joy. Right. Sometimes I feel that way myself. Like if you're really rushed in the morning, right? If you're late or you ran out of gas on your road trip, Sarah, right? That it's like very easy to sort of get the tunnel vision of like just going. And it's often when we're relaxed, we're able to find the joy. But Brene Brown's point is, I think, a little bit that it's cyclical, that if you practice the gratitude, you find the joy. And when you find the joy, it's easier to be grateful. But when we have gratitude, even for small things, that helps us feel more joy. And I think we're going to link this piece back into the Cheshvan practice towards the end. So I want to look at two more Jewish ideas from more contemporary thinkers like Rabbi Heschel, and then to turn to Cheshvan. Does anyone have anything that they want to thoughts, questions? Okay, so Rabbi Sacks talks a lot about giving thanks, actually. This particular essay comes from Parshat Tzav. And he talks about how giving thanks is beneficial to the body and the soul. And this is actually something that is backed up by science. We'll see in a moment. And I post that as like a teaser in some of these WhatsApp groups. That it turns out that people who study gratitude and gratitude practices find that people build stronger receptors to happiness. It helps reduce stress. It is certainly beneficial to your body. And as Rabbi Sacks says, right, his area of expertise also to the soul. It contributes to both happiness and health. It is also a self-fulfilling attitude, right? You don't have to have a lot. As Brene Brown said, the more we celebrate the good, the more good we discover that is worthy of celebration. So I want to pause there because that, I think, is the goal that I want to come back to for Cheshvan, which is that the more we celebrate the good, the more good we discover that is worthy of celebration. And Rabbi Sacks acknowledges that this is not easy or natural, right? We're hyper alert to potential threats and dangers because of sort of evolutionary and biological reasons. And so we really have to focus our attention to be grateful. Right? And he says, this is the logic of prayer, of making blessings, as we saw in Menachot, of Shabbat, right? Of taking a moment's pause, and many other elements of Jewish life. And it's also embedded in our collective name, right? The word modeh, I give thanks, comes from the same root as Yehudi, meaning Jew. And it comes from Leah, right? Which is super interesting because Leah is sort of a tortured soul and a sad wife, in the naming of her first three children, right? She mentions how much she has not felt loved when she names Ruvain. But when she has her fourth son, right, Rashi says, because she realizes she's going to have more than her share, right, of sons, she says, this time I will thank God. And that Yehuda comes from that. And so Rabbi Sacks says, Jewishness is thankfulness. It's not the most obvious definition of Jewish identity, but by far the most life-enhancing. So far, I think that everything that we've said has been either sort of inwardly focused or, like with brachot, is like a very man-God relationship-driven practice. And Rav Soloveitchik, in his book Family Redeemed, I think puts another piece into place that's important for us. He talks about how Hakarat HaTov signifies not only the duty of repaying a favor received, but an act of recognition, an axiological appraisal, a value judgment, a feeling of being indebted, and a sense of obligation as well. Gratitude means going out of ourselves towards thou. Right. And so I think that that is a really important piece. Gratitude means going out of ourselves, leaving our comfort zone, leaving our own quiet space, and going towards the person, our benefactor, right? Whether that is God, or I think that the Rav is actually talking about other humans as well, that we're placing ourselves in a unique relationship. We're letting him share with us our most precious possession, ourselves, right? When we express gratitude, we share a part of ourselves with the person for whom we are grateful. And I think that we can't underscore that just as giving gratitude is good for our bodies and good for our souls and good for our minds, expressing gratitude towards someone else where someone else has that feeling is good for their body and their soul and their minds. So this is my case, right? My case is that radical amazement, practice of radical amazement, practice of 100 brachot a day, thinking about how this is really embedded within our Jewish identity, and thinking about how gratitude creates a cycle of joy and more gratitude are the building blocks for how Jews think about giving thanks. Certainly is a Jewish value, something we should be doing as Jews every day, and something that we do when we say many brachot, as I'm sure many of us do on this call every day, but that we can build a real practice. We can be, as Rabbi Sachs says, we can have focused attention to it. And I brought this like cute little graphic that I made from some bullets from this journal. But I really think that many of these were mentioned, as I said above, right? Positive, there are psychological benefits, positive emotions and thoughts. We're more aware, we might feel more awake, increases self-satisfaction, enhanced mood, fights depression. Physical benefits, fascinating. They've measured that you have a stronger immune system, less aches and pains, and you reduce cardiac disease. Fascinating, right? Like imagine just by practicing gratitude, think of all the doctor's bills you could save on. And then the social benefits, which I think are hinted at in the Reb Soloveitchik paragraph there. Better communication, more empathy, stronger interpersonal relationships, more involvement as a team player, right? If we think about our community as a team and we're all players on the team, I think this is an important piece, component to it. Okay, I'm gonna invite ideas again. Anyone who wants to share something that's happened or a question or a thought, more than welcome. And then we'll turn to why now.
Hello.
Hello.
It's Judith, and I just wanted to share an experience I had that taught me a lot about what you're saying.
Awesome.
I was in the hospital with elective surgery and recovering in the orthopedic ward, and very much in pain during the night, but in control, because in those days we could measure out our own anesthetic medication. And one poor woman on that same ward kept yelling for help. And it was really annoying to the extent that the very patient nurse was beginning to lose her temper. And I realized that the woman in question was probably suffering from dementia and didn't understand what was happening to her. And I suddenly became very sympathetic, and I became, very grateful that at least I felt so much in control of my own situation. And I wished I could go help the woman. I realized, well, I can pray for her and try to believe that the good vibrations will somehow help calm her down. I prayed for the nurse too. And, eventually things settled down. And I certainly felt a lot better just for having a sense of agency. And that whole dynamic just revealed itself to me. I thought that was really interesting. So.
Yeah, thank you, Judith. I love that. It's right. I think the agency, certainly, right? That is a huge piece. Gratitude is saying whatever has happened, I have the agency to be grateful for X, Y, or Z, on any given day. That's huge. And I think you're also commenting on that sort of Kuzari double-edged sword, right? You saw play out in front of your eyes the terrible alternative you had to, as bad as you felt, something worse could be happening. And you could imagine the absence of what you were grateful for. And that is really powerful.
And it also gave me a way to avoid getting angry myself, which always makes the pain worse, if you're thinking negatively.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for sharing.
Welcome.
Okay, so why now? So the month of Cheshvan has become a month where we talk about gratitude practices. And we do that because of my dear mentor, friend, colleague, Rabbi Yafa Epstein. I don't know if she's been to Skokie before. If she ever is, she is well worth learning from. She's an amazing, amazing teacher. Feel very, very lucky to count her as a mentor and a friend. She graduated from Yeshivat Maharat, and several years ago, this is not her first, I think maybe it was in 2015, she started this idea and she created this hashtag thing around it. One thing you'll learn about me over time is I'm very technologically inept, but I've learned about the hashtag, and I learned about it through Rabbi Yafa. And she explains why she does it at the beginning of each month. And so I thought that I would post, this is just one of them. They're almost all identical. So that I don't feel like I'm ripping her off here. But she explains the rationale between using Cheshvan as the time for this. So it comes from like a play in words here, which is that one of the names we call Cheshvan is Mar Cheshvan. Mar means bitter. And so the rabbis of the Gemara period, or perhaps even earlier than that, explained that Cheshvan was mar, it was bitter, because it has no special days. I want to take 1 minute right now to say that is like a very Ashkenaz normative understanding. And the Ethiopian holiday of, I'm going to mispronounce it probably, but Sigid, is at the very, very tail end of Cheshvan. It's on the 29th of Cheshvan. So it's not true that there are no Jewish special days, but there are no Ashkenazi normative special days in Cheshvan. And so so that is part of why that's the hashtag, right? To unpack. Sometimes it's hard to find the spaces. No mar in this Cheshvan, right? So saying like, oh, Cheshvan is supposed to be bitter because there are no special days. Oh, well, if we introduce this gratitude practice, then there's no mar in this Cheshvan. Now, of course, she explains that mar really comes from Akkadian and just means the 8th, because Cheshvan is the 8th month from Nisan. But that the month is special because it allows us to find the power and the beauty in our everyday lives. And she writes so beautifully, right, that this is the ultimate challenge, to find Kodesh, holiness, in the mundane, right? I think if she was Rabbi Heschel, she would say to find radical amazement in the everyday, right? And so she invites people to join her in a daily gratitude challenge where we are aware of the blessings that surround us each day, right? And so I think that is a piece of this puzzle up here that we talked about, which is that there are days where it feels we are not, there's nothing to be, or, not great things are happening. And so the absence of any big days, right? The big's a lot to be thankful for. For some of us, we have more family in town or friends over. For some of us, we have foods we might not eat on normal days. For some of us, we can like sneak a nap in after shul. It's just, there's sort of, it's hard to hold on to it when nothing like gratitude within her surgery. But the real trick is like finding gratitude when you're not doing anything of note or import. So what I want us to do, what I want to invite us to do, is like Judith, to join together to create a gratitude practice that hopefully, maybe, could spread throughout the Shul or throughout the Skokie Valley community in a few ways. So here are my ideas, and then I'm going to turn off the share so I can see people's faces and we can chat if people are up for it. So this is a picture of the wall in my home. In the month of Cheshvan, we get out a pack of sticky notes and a Sharpie, and during dinner, we ask the kids to say something they're grateful for from that day. The rules are it has to really be true because my kids have wild imaginations. It has to have happened that day. And it can be anything within those parameters. And you can see that, first of all, different ages have different awarenesses of gratitude. And also different people have different sort of approaches to it. So, some of my children were thankful for different people each day. Ella is a friend, Mora Sarah, Seth is a friend, Mora Debbie, Peretz is the preschool director, right? And that's a beautiful thing, to be grateful for other people, sort of the Rev Soloveitchik model. My son, who was 5 last year, really was grateful for big things, justice and music and light and God. And that's also really important. Some days it's nice to be glad for the weather. Some days you might have something stronger in mind. Good side off time. Sometimes it's very hugs, sometimes it's soy sauce, right? There's no right or wrong way to do it, perhaps is what I'm trying to say. And so I think that it helps to do it together. So I'll share with you that I used to start this when my third Meira, who's now 4, was born. She was 3 months old when Cheshvan started, and some very old and dear friends of my mother's had gifted me with a postnatal massage. And I came home and felt like my cup was so full. I felt relaxed for the first time in a year of pregnancy and postpartumness. And I felt cared for, and I felt like everything was just great. And so when I read Rabbi Yaffa's post, I thought now's the day. I'm going to jump in and do say me. I'm somewhat of a Facebook lurker. I love to look at pictures of my, high school friends, kids, and everyone's interesting Divrei Torah and articles, but I hardly ever share, for better or for worse. Will, my husband, is the one who shares pictures of family trips and siyums and things like that, birthday parties. And so it took a lot to decide to do it. But I will tell you, if you're on the fence, I strongly encourage it. I find that it is so valuable. It has really become one of the highlights for me of my Jewish year, is to spend this month in deep community, sharing things that, again, sometimes it's soy sauce and sometimes it's something really deep that I might not have shared otherwise. And I found that so many people have reached out from all corners of the world. Oh, I'm really grateful for this thing or that thing. And it's really a community builder. The other thing that I would share is that if you're having a hard time for whatever reason, that you're welcome to share with me. My door is always open, or maybe it's not my. I still encourage you to think about doing it. I'll share that when we moved here to Ann Arbor last year, it was a hard cheshvan for me. In Philadelphia, it felt like the gratitudes flowed easily. Sometimes I had to choose which was my favorite or funniest or best one of the day. And here, I felt weeks went by where it was gray Michigan and I was not happy. And I forced myself to do it anyway. And it was a really valuable experience. And I think it actually helped me settle in a little bit into this community. And the last thing I would say is that in that experience, having a partner that kept me accountable was really important. And so I would really encourage you to join in. So how can you join in? So here's my pitch. So again, accountability partners. I created a WhatsApp group called Cheshvan Gratitude Group, and you can click. Hopefully you can click here, even if you're just looking at the screen. Otherwise, let me know, and I could probably post it. Let's see, copy link. Look what I can do. It's the only place I'm mildly technologically savvy. There we go. Click on that, and I would encourage people to share. And you don't have to share every day. You could share once in a while. This is a semi-private-ish way to share if you want within a group of people. If you post in places where hashtags exist, Facebook, Twitter, maybe Instagram, I don't know, Nomar and this cheshvan will connect you to a world of people posting. I also thought it would be fun to also use the hashtag Nomar, this cheshvan Skokie Valley, because then people could find all the ones from Skokie and sort of like in the cloud. But I am really not a cloud oriented person. I'm like a sticky note oriented person. And so I spoke with the office, and they have so kindly agreed to leave out sticky notes for anyone who enters the building, but also to write on a sticky note anything you send the office. And we will build a wall somewhere near the sanctuary where on Shabbat, while you're having Kiddush or you step out of shul, you could sort of schmooze other people's gratitude posts. We're also working on maybe like a spotlight in the newsletter or something on the website. So from like sort of smaller group oriented to like zooming it out to the big picture of Skokie Valley, I think there are lots of ways to get involved. Gratitude journaling is also wonderful. If you want to join the WhatsApp but don't want yours to be in the spotlight, just let me know. That's fine too. I'm going to stop the share again so I can see. We are 20 wonderful people here who were at least mildly interested in this idea. And I think that if we get the ball rolling, that we will create something really beautiful. Rav Ari shared with me that last year there were beautiful gratitude flags that the leadership at Skokie Valley created, where you could be grateful for a person. And I think that Rav Soloveitchik piece of being grateful for people is amazing. And I hope that we are able to express that gratitude. But also I want to encourage you to go beyond that, to think about, again, it could be grateful for a cup of coffee. It could be grateful for something big in your life. It's a way to build that muscle. And if you find it hard at the beginning, I would say like, keep going back to the gym. Don't lose hope, because it is hard. But when you cultivate it, I think it's so meaningful. And I really do. I think you could even go so far as to say like it's almost a Jewish imperative, right? If we think about those 100 brachot, I'm asking for just one gratitude post. But if you think about the bracha you say in that way, I bet you could even just post a bracha you said and a thing you did that over. I feel like I just talked a lot for 35 minutes. If anyone wants to like share or tips or tricks for gratitude practices, if you've done this before, I would say like, at every stage of life, I'm sure that these things are different challenges, but I have found that my children are both like the greatest source of gratitudes, but also the greatest, frustrations, right? And so I'm sure that's true for lots of things in life. And that I found I was just like a nicer mom for the month of Cheshvan in a lot of ways, because I was like, oh, that's so cute. I can write my gratitude post about that, instead of like, oh my God, Meira, you covered my whole kitchen in flour. And that, there are many beautiful benefits to it, at whatever stage in life you are. Okay, I'm really going to stop talking. So if anyone wants to join in, please.
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, wait, hold on. Oh, wait, I don't know if I could turn my camera on from my phone. Hold on. It's in my settings, so I'm just going to talk. Okay. Advice. So I love this. I've done gratitude journals before. I think it's so helpful. But I think one thing that might be I know it's on my mind, I don't know if it's on anyone else's minds, is like sometimes when there's a lot going on in the world and we're in more of like a fear mindset, or that like kind of stressed out fight or flight, especially with everything going on with like anti-Semitism right now, it like takes me out of that gratitude space. Like, it's like I so quickly, it's like I really do so strongly believe in like, media of gratitude. I've really worked on this in my life, but the first thing that will take me out is like that fear of like, oh my gosh, but the world and everything's caving in, and then it's like all of the gratitude goes out the window because I'm like scared, And I wanted to know if you had maybe anything to say about that, any piece of advice for us.
Yeah. Well, so thank you so much for mentioning that, because I did have a note that I ignored, of course, which is to say that the first year I did this was the year of the Pittsburgh Tree of Life synagogue shootings. And I was totally rocked. I thought, Maura Myers, because you're somehow creating a problem on my screen. But if you would like to speak, feel free to unmute later. Um, I was totally rocked by it. How could I possibly express gratitude for my cup of coffee when people had, suffered so horribly in Pittsburgh? And Rabbi Yaffa addressed it, and we actually changed the hashtag for the rest of that year, and it was no more Mar in this Cheshvan, because it felt like, how could we even possibly pretend to say there's no Mar? And so I think what I would say is, on the one hand, is I would acknowledge it. And if you want to post with that hashtag of no more Mar, like because something happens with Kanye or something more serious than Kanye in the world, right? I encourage that. Like, I think it's okay. And it may even make our gratitude stronger to say, like, yes, we can be grateful at a time where there's so much we are not grateful for. And that like that realness is good. I embrace it. And maybe even just posting with that hashtag is like a signal to everybody else that you're struggling with that like broader context that day. The other thing I would say, and like this comes from having a mother who's a social worker probably, is right, like this mantra of like what you can control and what you can't. We can't control, for better or worse, the people in this room. I think we are powerful people, but we cannot control a lot of what goes on in the world. And that finding this place where we have some control, I actually think could lead to feeling more grateful in those moments of panic as opposed to less. But again, it does take sort of like that focused attention that Rabbi Sachs talks about. And some days, like we don't have it, right? Like, I think there was a day where I said, like, I had nothing to be grateful for. I was like racking my brain and I couldn't find it. And I can't remember what I settled on. I might have settled on just having a space to say that in a group of people who had been like cheering me on all month. And you know what? When I wrote that and I stepped away, I felt lighter and I felt better and I felt like a little more in control because I said something true and it's still a negative. Right. And I was like a little worried that people in Ann Arbor would not like me so much after I said that. And people reached out and said like, hey, it's hard to move and it's hard to move to a small place. And if you need me to pick up chicken for you in Detroit, let me know. Right. Like it was okay. It was okay to be real and to be honest and to be grateful just for one small teeny tiny thing. And so I think it's okay to do that. It's okay to say, I feel like things are really out of control. And so I'm grateful that I could control X. Whatever that tiny, teeny X was. But it might not work for you. And maybe the other people have other solutions. I would just say maybe like that also brings me back to the brachot anchor of gratitude, which is like, even when you are suffering from food insecurity, you still say a bracha when you eat something, right? Which is say like the world could feel terrible and we still have to be grateful when we have food to put in our bodies. And so maybe under that model, like, again, I'm grateful that I opened my closet and couldn't decide what to wear because I have so many clothes, right? Or I'm grateful that there's a guard who puts himself out there on the line every day at school, even if I'm not grateful that we have to pay for him, right? Like, I'm grateful that I have to pay tuition because I have a job, right? At day school. Like maybe this is like the spin doctor grant writer in me, but I feel like there's always some way to reframe your bad thing as a good thing. And it might make you feel better while you do it, or it might feel fake and then like delete it and you don't have to post it. Okay. Well, I know it's getting late. I welcome everyone. Ooh, someone is saying something here. Oh, I love this. Rachel Morris is saying that her clinic office starts off each staff meeting with positives, personal or work ones. Yes. Amazing, right? That she's saying that it helps her spin a situation that maybe she was frustrated with to one that she might be proud of. I think that's great. And I think, that's like part of the gratitude cycle, right? Is that sometimes the things that give us the hardest time end up feeling like our greatest achievements when we've worked through them. And that can be a gratitude in like, that's like the meta, and I also would say I often switch off between meta, right? God, justice, whatever, like my sons were, to the very detail oriented based on how I'm feeling when I post. And sometimes I post in the morning when something happens. And sometimes I sit down at the end of the day and I'm like, oh, and some days that I think in the past, I might've said like, oh, that was a fine day. In the middle of Cheshvan, I'm like, I couldn't decide which thing to post about. Like, did I want to go funny and light or about my family or deep and strong? Right. So I think it gets easier over time, like more things become apparent. And that this practice of starting with the positives, as you said, Rachel, is a really, is a beautiful way to enter Cheshvan and sort of leave the Chagim behind us and look forward towards a lighter time of Hanukkah. I have the WhatsApp. If anyone needs help getting into it, feel free to let me know. You do not have to have been here tonight to do this or anything around it. So please feel free to invite anyone you'd like into the group. Oh, I see people are coming in. That's wonderful. Feel free to use the Skokie Valley hashtag on Facebook if you want me to find it, if I'm not your friend yet. And feel free to send them to the office. If you happen to be in Shul, you could stop by for a sticky note. I won't be back in Skokie Valley physically until the 17th of November. And I hope to see the wall and do all kinds of fun things in person. But I hope that it will become like a little bit of a conversation piece. You are now all officially dubbed as stewards of explaining the project to your friend at Kiddush, who's like, why are there sticky notes all over the wall? And I hope that this journey together is meaningful and feels sort of inherently Jewish and also just inherently, character building. Thank you guys so much for coming. I feel really excited. I don't know if you could tell already just by talking it through with you guys. So thank you. And I'm happy to stay, but otherwise have a good night. And I'll see you every day. Yes, I can definitely copy the link again. 1 second. No problem. That is for the WhatsApp group. And the hashtag could either be no mar in this Cheshvan, which is the sort of like worldwide one, or you could add no mar in this Cheshvan Skokie Valley to the end. All right.
And do we have a goal, like as a person, to say like 3 things a day, 1 thing a day? I don't know.
So my thought was 1 thing a day. But you could share, first of all, I would say you could share as many as you want. And I think that you should think about like what feels right to you. I could imagine that for someone who already does this or has done this before, maybe you want to like push yourself to think of 2 or to think of 1 that's sort of outside your comfort zone, maybe as a way to think about it. Like I could already tell you some of the ones that will appear in my month, right? I'm always grateful for the public library, like one day, because I am always grateful for it. And there will be a day I go with my kids in Cheshvan, if not like 15. And so that's like always a day where like I feel low on gratitude, but maybe I don't want to give myself that out this year. Maybe I want to say the day I post about the library, I'll also find something else to be grateful for, right? Or maybe to post 1 about my family, like I talk a ton about my kids. Maybe I want to find a day to say like, this has nothing to do with my kids. I'm just grateful for this or that, right? Or about my job, or, I think there are lots of ways. It's a great question, Sarah. There are lots of ways to make it more challenging if you wish. Or to tie it to a bracha, that would be an interesting thing. Or, be creative. The sky is the limit.
I love that you say the library. I'll just to lighten this up, because I was going to go with my daughter this evening to the library, and I went on to the WhatsApp. I was actually going into a different WhatsApp group, and I was going to see if anyone needed me to pick up or drop off anything to the library. And then I saw Rena Thompson's note on the on the Skokie Valley WhatsApp. Like I happened to then look at that and I'm like, oh, it's closed. And so I was so thankful for the WhatsApp, which gave me an alert that it was closed right when I was heading there. So thank you, Rena.
No problem. Yeah, the once in the lifetime that it closed because they're redoing the parking lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. And that's like, right? Like And it's such a silly thing, right? And for me, again, I'm not like a poster on Facebook, but I was shocked, like at all of my friends who love the library, right? Who knew such a great love existed out there? And so I think it really like it builds such beautiful bridges across like even your close friends who you just don't talk to about the library. Because like, why would you, already we share a love of libraries, Sarah. Awesome.
Oh, you should come check out our library. Then you'll understand why we all love our library.
It's the best library in the country. You've got to come.
I'll have to. Well, my kids are quite taken with that little van, the bookmobile that goes around.
Yeah. No, even when I didn't live in Skokie Library was it. You got to go to the library.
Oh man, maybe I'll go on the 17th when I get in.
Yeah.
Did it rain a lot? Why are people going in canoes?
Because that was Manya, right? Manya's because the parking lot is all it's being paved. So she said she had to figure out a way to get to the library, I guess, somehow. I don't know what it could do.
I see.
I think she should parachute, actually.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Oh my gosh, that's so funny, Maura Myers. Maura Myers says that she moved to Skokie for the library. Wow. Oh, I will say Ann Arbor's is pretty good. Maybe it's a Midwestern thing because I was grateful for it in Philly, but it was not quite as good in Philly.
Yeah, the library here won a national medal in 2006, 2007.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, I'm sure Ann Arbor probably has a pretty awesome library too. But yeah, so
that's kind.
people do actually move here because of the library. I mean, people come here from outside of Skokie to go to the library. So
fascinating.
It is a coveted card. That's all I can say. Yeah. So
that is like another interesting thing is, right? I bet you that there will be more than 15 library sticky notes on the wall then at some point, it's interesting to see what will trend. I'm also grateful for the library. Yeah, cool.
Yes. So yeah, we are very spoiled here when it comes to that. So, well, thank you very much. This was very interesting, and I'm very excited about this.
Amazing. Thank you.
I have a question for you.
Oh, sure.
You mentioned like a challenge would be tying this into brachot. And I was just curious as I may not be alone in thinking like, well, how would I go about that? And being not necessarily as well versed in like, what are all the brachot that we say and when and all of that. And like, how might one, not necessarily as a one-to-one kind of thing, but if someone wanted to stretch themselves in that way, do you have any, and if you don't have an answer to that,
I do. I'm just gonna reach for a siddur. 1 second. So there are lots of fascinating brachot out there. And they are in your Art Scroll siddur, amongst other places. Oh my gosh, I opened my siddur and a library card fell out. Can't make that up. Must have been a placeholder one day. I think that in the Art Scroll they're before Mincha. Yeah, they are. So there are lots of brachot that are specific, right? Like upon seeing an earthquake or a comet, especially lofty mountains, large rivers, a rainbow, thunder, lightning, upon seeing the ocean, which I guess you can't do in Skokie, much to my great disappointment. That is what would make Skokie perfect for me. Upon seeing exceptionally beautiful people, trees, or fields, upon seeing exceptionally strange looking people or animals, seeing a Torah scholar, a secular scholar, seeing a Gentile king. This is all to say that I think that like part of the trick could be in a special bracha, right? Meaning, oh, I'm really grateful for this. And actually there's a bracha for that. Or that's like one way to go about it is sort of the interesting bracha way. The other way that I was thinking about it was to think like a lot of the brachot in Birkot HaShachar are about things that I think we are truly grateful for, being free, being Jewish, or, however you sort of want to frame thinking about that, or our gender, thinking about our ability, like to have limbs that work, to have clothes on our backs, right? And so to say, I'm not just going, speaking to myself and letting you listen, I'm not just going to like mumble through my davening this morning, but I'm going to actually think of an instance that I can share of the gratitude around that thing. Or, in Mincha, right? Like, oh, I'm davening the Shemona Esrei of Mincha, and I'm davening about health. And I'm quite grateful that I'm actually very healthy today, right? That, I happen to have contracted COVID in the lovely city of Skokie. But my children did not. And I'm so grateful for that, right? Like, I won't say it's 100% positive, but the timeline matches up pretty well. But I am actually truly very grateful that it was not like debilitating, because I have a nursing baby, and I like really wasn't willing to part with that. So I had to be able to care for the baby, right? So that was sort of what I had in mind. It was like using either bracha you say every day and thinking of like a concrete example of a gratitude, or of looking through a list of sort of unusual brachot, and then, right, like I bet you could have said one of those brachot on the leaves, the one about the lofty trees, or about the unusual nature, right? And so like thinking about how to link it that way. And I only say that because of the Gemara in Menachot about 100 brachot. I think, certainly you could do this without brachot. I feel like this is a small enough group that I could say this. Mostly people I know, all friends, I'm sure. You could make up your own bracha. That would be so beautiful, right? Like if in your gratitude, you thought of like a way to say thank you to God that felt like new and authentic, and you wanted to share it, I would definitely put that sticky note up on the wall. And not every gratitude might be the kind of bracha where you thank God, or the library. But I think that there might be a way, to like think about how to, I've read particularly beautiful brachot, is what I will say, around certain things that are more like new age, like brachot for inclusion, brachot for thanks for, surviving X or Y thing. Even thinking about benching gomel, right? When something dangerous happens to you, we say a bracha where we say we're grateful that we've come through it. Using the gomel benching sort of as like a way of thinking about a gratitude post. I don't know. This is obviously like brainstorming. I'm happy to brainstorm more, but I didn't have a particular idea in mind. But it could be linked to a deeper dive into brachot than you ever wanted to go to. All right, I can't wait to start sharing in the morning. I will see you all then.
Bye-bye. Have a good night. And
Thank
refuah
you.
shalema.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Shalema. Thank you.
Sorry on behalf of all of Skokie that you got here.
It's okay. It was bound to happen somewhere. I had felt like one of those special people who never got it, but turns out not quite that special.
Sorry.
It's okay. Now at least they'll be behind me for a while, right?
Muted.
That's what they say.
Not muted. You want to say?
All right. Good night, Terry.
Okay.
Oh, did you want to say something, Jerry or Tamar?
Did you get Tamar?
No, just thank you so much.
Oh, thanks, Tamar. I miss seeing your guys' face, but it was nice to see your names up there.